You're about to start reading Pride and Prejudice, one of my favorite books. I read it in high school and I didn't think I'd like it, and I really did. You might be troubled by some of the language because we don't speak the same way anymore, but I think once you start going, you're going to get into it. It might seem at first glance that this is a romance novel. And yes, there are elements of romance to it, but it's not just a romance novel. It's a novel about society and what roles we have to play. I chose this for our section on mothers and daughters and sisters because of the relationships that take place during the book, during the whole story. How do sisters react to each other? How do they react to their parents? How do parents treat their, not just their children, but their own relationship with their husbands and their wives? And especially a look at income. And I ask you before you read it, can income change the way you think about love and marriage? We like to say right away, no, that doesn't matter. But when people are out looking for a spouse, how many of them say, I'd like somebody who's poor? We think of falling in love with someone who can at least take care of themselves, not falling in love and marrying someone that we need to take care of. So it does play a role, but not as much of a role as it did back in Austen's time. You have to remember that the Bennet family did live a charmed life. Mr. Bennet is a gentleman, which means he didn't go out and earn his money. He basically inherited it. The problem with the way he inherited it was that his house and his income can only be passed on to a male heir. So if he does not supply a male heir, he has to go to a cousin or a brother or uncle, whatever, the next available male heir. When he got married, he didn't see it as a problem. He ended up having 5 children, but they were all girls. What are they going to do once their father dies? He doesn't seem to be too worried about this, but Mrs. Bennet worries herself sick. She brought some money to the marriage, and the daughters will have to live off of that. However, they're going to have to divide it 5 ways among them. So they're not going to be desolate, but they certainly aren't going to live the way that they want to live or that they're used to living. They might be a little poor. So when the opportunity to marry a rich man presents itself, Mrs. Bennet is going to jump all over that. Now one might think, oh, this is terrible and she's only after money. But she is thinking about her daughters' futures. What are they going to do? And if one of them marries well, you don't have to worry as much about the others. Hopefully the sisters would take care of each other. What's their obligation to each other? Ask yourself that. What would you do for family and what would you do for a sister? Also, what is a mother's role? At the time this book takes place, the level of income places the Bennets in the top 1% of the English income distribution. Again, that's at the time. Mr. Darcy's huge income places him at least in the top 1/10 of 1% of income distribution. So they have wealth, the Bennets, but Mr. Darcy's is 3 times greater than Elizabeth's father each year. And if they were to marry, Elizabeth wouldn't be bringing anything into the marriage, except for the little bit that her mother left her. So it would be foolish in her mother's mind for her to refuse anyone who would be offering her a better income, her as the daughters, than what she would get on her mother's inheritance alone. So waiting for the ideal love or to marry for love seems ridiculous because they're in such dire straits right now. 5 daughters, no sons. Their house is going to be inherited by a relative who could kick them out if he wanted to. So if you were in a more equal society, which they are not, you could base your decisions of who to marry on love. However, in this time, when so much depends, especially if you're a woman, on who you marry and how you marry, that decision the decision about getting money might trump a decision over love. And you'll see that come into play in the book too. Can you be very choosy if it means spending not only your life alone, but probably poor? Think about that as you read. So don't be too quick to judge the characters and what they do, because we live in a different time. Yes, we do talk about money and we want to marry someone who is going to bring us some prosperity, either together or alone. We don't seek to be desolate, but we have more equal opportunity now. If you're a woman, you can go out and you can get a job. Back then, you couldn't. So keep that in mind as you read the book and decide which character do you like, which one do you relate to, and how would you decide your future in this situation.